I read this tweet today. It says, price's reaction to news is often more important than the news itself. And it got me thinking that we're in this news cycle where a whole lot of good news is coming out and the price ain't moving. In fact, we're chopping and chopping and chopping, and this chop is shaking out the market players and making people believe that maybe the alt season won't come. And I really want to talk about this alt season because that's the question that I get every single day. When will alt season come? And the truth is that I'm not sure that it's coming, and if it is coming, it pretty much ain't coming soon, and we have to discuss why that's happening. So today is all about when this alt season will come and whether we will actually have an alt season like the alt season that we're actually used to. Let's do this, guys. If you're here, like the video, subscribe, and let's get going. You know it's true. It is the biggest question on everyone's mind. When is alt season? Because the truth is that everyone that's in crypto is here to make money. And what they know is that they make money when it's alt season. You don't really make money in Bitcoin season. The people that made money in Bitcoin season are the people that got into Bitcoin when Bitcoin was $200, $300, $400, maybe $2,000, $3,000, $4,000. And so what everybody here is waiting for is we're all actually waiting for alt season to make us rich. But what if the alt season ain't coming? Or what if the type of alt season that we have is going to be completely different? And that's what we're going to be speaking about today. I've got a lot of data points to show you that actually, if there is going to be an alt season, it's actually going to be very, very, very different from the alt seasons that we know. And that means that the same approach that you applied in the previous alt season ain't going to get you through the next alt season. And you got to listen up till the end to make sure that you understand exactly how to trade this alt season. I know it's not the best news that you want to hear, but let me tell you, after I prepare you for this new kind of alt season, then I think you will actually really be prepared and you'll actually end up making money as opposed to just waiting for this general long alt season that usually happens on the year post the halving. So listen, if that sounds good to you and you're not already subscribed, you know what to do. Let's try to get it to 1.15 during the show. Also, I want you guys to smash a like button. People say good news, bad news. Truth is, it's got to be honest news. I don't really care whether you like what I have to say or don't like what I have to say. I've got to be honest with you. When I discover something, when I do some calculations and the calculations show me a certain outcome, I have to show you what that outcome actually is. And that's exactly what I'm going to do today. So let's get into the state of the market, right? Where are we in the market? Yesterday was a green day. Today is a red day. And that's exactly what's happening in the market. You're basically getting chopped. 1 day is green, 1 day is red, 3 days green, 3 days red, 2 weeks green, 2 days red. And effectively what's happening now is we find ourselves in this range pattern again, right? We entered this range pattern on the 18th of November. And since the 18th of November, we've been in this range. And it's not a new thing for us because we spent 7 months in a range last year waiting to break out on President Trump's presidency, on the announcement of President Trump's presidency. And so someone says, this is our new life, get comfy. We're going to range and we're going to range and we're going to range. And that's pretty much what's actually happening. If you look at the altcoins, the range is even worse because it ranges in a much bigger range, right? And so because it's ranging in a much bigger range here, a lot of people are actually getting squeezed, right? So you look at this range over here and you say, okay, the total range here for Bitcoin is between 91 and effectively, so to 20, you're basically talking about a 20% range. When you look at total 3 and you look at the range on total 3, it's a much, much, much bigger range. It's about a 30% range. And that range, that chopping and in the range actually flushes out a whole lot of people. If you look at Ethereum, then it becomes a much, much, much more serious picture. And the reason is because if you're an ETH holder and you've been holding in the range, then actually you've been in a range since February 2024. Since February last year, so that's almost a year, ETH has been at exactly the same price. The range has been a huge range. It's been from here all the way up to here. So you've got a 95% range, but you're staying in the range and you're at the same place that you were last February, believe it or not. That is how crazy this range is. And the worst thing is that what this is doing is it's starting to flush people out. I found myself sitting last night on the market and just basically being just bored. Like there's nothing to do in this market. I just felt absolutely, absolutely bored. I'm not the only one. People are asking about alt season. People are saying that the feed is depressed. There's the .eth capitulation. Trump hasn't released the strategic reserve. And so there's a lot of stuff that's actually happening in the market right now, which is getting people emotionally exhausted. People are giving up on this market. I saw this tweet from 𝗙𝗢𝗙𝗎𝗓 who says, looks like an exhausted market. To make things worse, the market ain't responding to news. we're getting a whole lot of good news, and the market ain't responding. I mean, I'll tell you that in the old days, if Larry Fink was sitting in Davos and talking about Bitcoin hitting $700,000,
if you're frightened of your debasement of your currency, or you're frightened of your economic or political stability of your country, you could have an internationally based instrument called Bitcoin that will overcome those local fears. And so I'm a big believer in the utilization of that as an instrument. And so if that becomes true, and you see that it could be a proper hedge against maybe hope security or equities. Yeah. The question is, could you see a 2 or 5% allocation? I was with a sovereign wealth fund during this week, and that was the conversation. Should we have a 2% allocation? Should we have a 5% allocation? If everybody adopted that conversation, but it would be 500,000, 600,000, 700,000 per Bitcoin.
So, I mean, he's talking to sovereign wealth funds, and they're deciding whether to put 2% or 5% of a sovereign wealth fund into Bitcoin. And even that's not moving the price of Bitcoin. So it feels like with all the news out in the market, with Trump, with everything out in the market, this market's got fatigue, and we've pretty much run out of steam in this market. And to make matters even worse, I hear some news, or some people are panicking about the Bank of Japan's interest rate decision tomorrow, because what's happening tomorrow is that the Bank of Japan is meeting tomorrow morning, and there is a 95% chance that the Bank of Japan will actually increase interest rates. And a lot of people think that we're going to get a repeat of the last time that the Bank of Japan actually landed up increasing interest rates. You'll remember that the last time the Bank of Japan increased interest rates was in July, and they increased on the 31st of July. They increased the interest rates by instead of keeping it at 0.1, they increased it by another 0.15 to 0.25%. And what happened to the market was an absolute catastrophe. So you can see that that's when it actually happened. And this is the chart of the NASDAQ. You can see that the chart of the NASDAQ went down from here to all the way down here. So the NASDAQ went down 16% when the Bank of Japan increased its interest rates. That, of course, hit the Bitcoin market. So you can see that the Bitcoin markets went down 30%. And what happened was, you can see that the yen strengthened against the dollar when the Bank of Japan actually increased interest rates. So why did it happen? Why did that happen last time? Well, the truth is that it happened because what they call the Japanese yen cash and carry trade started to unwind. And for those of you who don't know what that means, because borrowing money in Japan was pretty much interest-free for so many years, so many people actually went and borrowed money in Japan. So you can see for years and years and years and years, to borrow money in Japan was absolutely free. And then the Bank of Japan increased interest rates twice in a very short period of time. Not by a lot, but they went from 0 to 0.25%. And that shocked people. And people thought that the Japanese interest rates were going to carry on increasing. And they used to take this money that they borrowed for free, and they used to invest it in other countries. So you'd borrow in Japan for 0%. Then you would take that money and you'd invest that money in the United States and get a 5%, or invest it in the NASDAQ or wherever else. And you were borrowing for free and you were getting all the upside. And that's when Japan started to raise interest rates, well, that shocked the whole market. And the whole market was scared that they would raise interest rates to a point where it's expensive to borrow in Japan. And therefore, people would start unwinding their trades, and they'd start selling all the things that they bought that gave you the return. So things like US Treasury bonds, things like US property, things like US technology. And so now the markets are worried that if the Bank of Japan actually increases interest rates again tomorrow, we're going to get the same thing. Now, I don't think that's going to happen, and I'll show you why. In the previous interest rate increase, the interest rate increase caught people by surprise. You can see that the forecast was no interest rate increase, and they increased it by 0.15, which brought it up to 0.25. And so what happened was the market was actually caught off guard, right? And because the market was caught off guard, the market reacted quite badly. But in this case, 95% of traders are already pricing in the budget increase, right? And so if something is already 95% priced in, then what you can say is that you're getting that the only thing that you can get is you can get an upside surprise, because chances are they will probably increase interest rates. When they increase interest rates, chances are that that it's all priced in. But what if I don't increase interest rates? Then we get a positive surprise. And so that is effectively why I think this Bank of Japan thing is pretty much nothing. As I said, last time it caught everybody by surprise. And after that, the government kind of said, look, we're not going to increase interest rates for a while. They kept the markets at calm. And now the markets are actually prepared for it. However, what we should do is just keep watching the US markets today. Because if we see that the US markets start to dip or start to get worried, then we'll know that they're starting to get scared. But what the markets are telling you now, as you can see, Bitcoin's pumping and the markets aren't coming down, is that don't worry about the Japanese yen cash and carry trade. So I don't think that that's anything to worry about. Anyway, let's get back to our alt season discussion, because I think that that's why everybody's here. We want to know when alt season is going to happen, right? And I can tell you for sure that right now, I think you'll agree with me, right now ain't altcoin season. I'll tell you, you can see it in multiple indicators. Of course, the first indicator you can see in the altcoin chart. Generally, this altcoin chart decides or determines whether or not it's altcoin index. It says that when 70 of the top or 75 of the top 100 coins perform better than Bitcoin in the last 90 days, that is typically alt season. It's not alt season based on this measure. If you look at 𝗙𝗘𝗡, he says, look, it's not Bitcoin season or alt season now. Nothing's actually happening on the market. If you look at this indicator over here, which is probably my favorite indicator around altcoin season, it takes total 3, which is total market cap, excluding Bitcoin and excluding Ethereum. And I divided that by Bitcoin, by Bitcoin's price. And so what you're comparing is the price of alts versus the price of Bitcoin. Now, what you can see is that when you look at the price of alts versus the price of Bitcoin, pretty much they've been down until about the 9th of November when Trump came into power. And since then, we had a spike, but now we're consolidating at this level. But it's certainly not alt season when you look at this indicator. Another indicator that I'm looking at is the market dominance, or the Bitcoin dominance. And when I look at the Bitcoin dominance, alt season usually happens when the Bitcoin dominance drops very, very, very quickly. It happened over here in 2017 in the bull market, and it happened over here in 2021 in the bull market. And I don't think, based on this chart, that it is alt season. I'll tell you that much for sure. So if it's not alt season now, then the big question is, when will alt season actually start? Because that is the $1 million question the $1 billion question that everybody's asking. When is alt season actually going to start? So let's look at some indicators that can tell us when this alt season is actually going to start. First thing is, generally, alt season starts 240 days after the halving, more or less. In this bull market, it was 240 days. In this bull market, it was 238 days. We are now 280 days after the halving. And as I've showed you, so far, it's not alt season. So the question is, if it's not alt season yet, and alt season is 40 days late, is it alt season, right? That's the big question. Are we actually going to have alt season? You can also see that the Bitcoin dominance has its sharpest drop about 275 days after the halving. And if you look at where we are today, as I said, we're 280 days after halving, and we still haven't had that big drop in Bitcoin dominance. So based on this, it's late. Okay, so once again, it's late. So you got two indicators that tell you that it's late. Now let's look at the third indicator. We know that in the year after the halving, which is 2017 and 2021, we know that the alt season often kicks off with Ethereum having massive performance. In this year, it was 518%. In this year, it was 160%. And in this year, Ethereum is sitting at minus 4.09%. Okay, certainly based on these indicators, alt season is late. It should have been here a long time ago, or specifically maybe 30 days ago at the beginning of Q1, and alt season certainly isn't here. When we look at, plain and simple, when we look at the total 3, when alt season actually happens, the one thing we know about alt season and when it happens is, it starts round about now. You can see it started here in the beginning of January. And it happens really quickly. You can see that the total market cap went up, or the total total 3 went up by 700%, and that happened over 126 days or 18 weeks. And so what we do know is that when alt season actually starts, it's aggressive. It's crazy. You don't get time to think. The markets run very, 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 very fast, and they leave everybody behind. I'll give you some snapshots from last time's alt season. So this is the alt season. This chart only goes back to when Solana was listed. Solana was trading at $20, and at the end of the alt season, in 17 weeks, Solana went up to $240. So you're talking about 17 weeks, 100 days, Solana went and did a 10x. That's nothing. Solana was one of the weaker performers in the last cycle. I'll show you another token. This token is Axie Infinity. It also started in December 2020, more or less. And this token went up 166,000% in a matter of 11 weeks. 11 months. 11 months. So you can see that when the alt season actually happens, the alt season is incredibly, incredibly, incredibly fast. And usually what happens is this alt season comes when we are in periods of increased liquidity. And the increased liquidity usually comes from the Fed. And right now, we're not in a period of increased liquidity. In fact, the Fed hasn't started to increase its balance sheet and to put more money into circulation. So I think with that in mind, we can say that it's not alt season, and alt season is very, very, very late this year. And we need to understand if this alt season is ever going to come at all. But before we understand if this alt season is ever going to come at all, we need to understand what alt season actually is. Because if you understand what alt season actually is, then you'll be able to understand when this alt season actually arrives. And then you'll understand whether it's going to arrive, and you'll understand, you'll know everything about it. So what is alt season, right? So I made a little slide first. And in the slide, I basically said that you have, let me just see here, slide. There we go. Okay, so if you look at what alt season actually is, I said alt season happens when relatively more money flows into altcoins than into Bitcoin. So if you were going to define alt season, what you're saying about alt season is you're saying alt season happens when more money flows into altcoins than into Bitcoin on a relative basis. So the word, when I use the word relatively, that is probably the key word here. Because it's not about how much money flows into altcoins. It's about how much more money relative to the market cap of those altcoins flows into Bitcoin. What I mean is, if Bitcoin is trading at a $1 trillion market cap and $100 billion flows in, that's 10% of Bitcoin. But if $100 billion flows into the altcoin market, and the altcoin market is much smaller, then that $100 billion will make a much bigger impact on the individual tokens. And so what you're looking for is you're looking for a period when relatively more money flows into altcoin than into Bitcoin. This is a very, very, very important sentence. And then usually this happens when there is more global liquidity and people feel rich enough to take risks. So generally, when there is more global liquidity, people move lower down, there's more money in circulation, and therefore people move lower down the risk curve or higher up the risk curve because they're looking for much better returns. And then more money flows relatively out of Bitcoin into the altcoins. Because people believe, hey, we've made enough money on Bitcoin. Bitcoin ain't going to move up from $100,000 to $1 million. I ain't going to get rich investing in Bitcoin. And I have so much money that I'm actually willing to take risks. And therefore, I'm willing to go into the altcoins, and that is when we actually get the altcoin season. So what you need is you need two things to actually happen. You need relatively more money to flow into altcoins than into Bitcoin. Otherwise, it's just Bitcoin season over and over and over and over again. And you need and usually the cause of this is more global liquidity. So now let's see how we're doing on those specific indicators. So you can see generally what that means, and you can see it beautifully here in the chart, is that in these periods over here, when you take the total market cap of the others, which is the top altcoins less the top 10 divided by Bitcoin, you can see that in these periods, more money is flowing into the others than is flowing into Bitcoin, and therefore they outperform relative to Bitcoin, right? So here you can see more money flowed into altcoins than into Bitcoin, and therefore they outperform Bitcoin. Same thing over here. And then the big question is whether or not we're going to get the same thing over here. Generally, that season is characterized by money flowing into ETH first, And you can see that when you compare ETH to Bitcoin, more money is flowing into ETH relative to Bitcoin. Now remember, it's not more money is flowing into ETH. It's more money flowing into ETH relative to Bitcoin, which means that if you take the market cap of ETH, or let's just look at the market cap of Bitcoin, which is this number over here. So the market cap of Bitcoin is $2 trillion, and the market cap of ETH is $394 million, which means that for every $1, for every $1 billion that flows into Bitcoin, you need 1/6 of that or more to flow into ETH. Okay, so if you get an inflow of $1 billion into Bitcoin, but you get anything over $150 million flowing into ETH, ETH wins, and therefore this chart will actually, this chart over here will actually flow upwards. So in this period, relative to Bitcoin, not on an absolute value, but relative to the market cap of Bitcoin, more money is actually flowing into ETH, right? You can see it over here and you can see it over here. So then this is usually the indicator that we're getting into alt season. And usually this happens when the Fed increases its balance sheet. Now, what do we mean by the Fed increases its balance sheet? Assume the Fed has zero assets and it buys assets on the market. It goes out the market and it buys assets. To pay for those assets, it has to put money into circulation. That money into circulation goes to the sellers of those assets, and we have more money in circulation, and therefore people feel richer. And you can see that the Fed has increased its balance sheet a few times. You can see in 2008, with the housing collapse, the Fed increased its balance sheet. You can see that there was an increase over here in 2019. We started an increase in the balance sheet. And then there was the biggest increase of all time in the balance sheet when COVID actually hit. That took the balance sheet from $4 trillion in assets to $7 trillion in assets. In fact, higher up to $9 trillion in assets. So what we know is that the altcoin seasons, which you can see over here, let's just have a look here. 2020 was an altcoin season, and here probably 2019, 2020 was an altcoin season. Let's go onto the chart here. You can see that, in fact, let's look at it over here. You can see that that is when the altcoin seasons actually started to play out, right? So that's where the altcoin season started to play out. Right now, as we stand though, the Fed has not started to increase the balance sheet. It may start to increase the balance sheet on the 19th of March, but remember, the Fed knows that if and when it increases the balance sheet, it runs the risk of inflation. And right now, the Fed is very, very, very worried about inflation. And so there is a chance that the Fed won't even increase its balance sheet in March this year. And that will have to be kicked down the road to May. And some people are actually saying, in fact, I think this article is one of them. In an email report, Goldman Sachs said the Fed is expected to stop increasing its balance sheets when reserves go from abundant to ample in aggregate. That is, it changes the supply. And Stanley predicts that the Fed will not stop quantitative tightening. Will stop quantitative tightening in 2025, but not actually begin loosening the balance sheet. So we are now waiting for the Fed to actually do this. Now I want to look at a couple of other reasons or a couple of other things about when this alt season can actually start. You will remember that I said to you that in order for there to be alt season, we need to get relatively more money flowing into Bitcoin, into altcoins, than into Bitcoin. And traditionally, that money has come in from a bunch of crypto investors. And so what they would do is they'd invest in Bitcoin, and then they'd move lower down the risk curve. They started in Bitcoin, then they moved to ETH, then they moved to Sol, then they moved all the way down and tried to get more and more and more money on, try to get more and more and more money onto their into the altcoins so they could make outsized returns. But this year, we have a completely different beast. The problem is that the amount of money that's actually flowing into Bitcoin is not the same as in other cycles. We have two big animals bringing money into Bitcoin. One of them is bringing money from fixed income investors who has found a way to get fixed income investors to invest in Bitcoin, and that's Michael Saylor, right? And he's bringing in billions and billions and billions of dollars. In fact, his Bitcoin stash is valued at 46.8 billion. He is up 17 billion, which means that he has spent about $29 billion actually buying Bitcoin. The next animal that is bringing money into Bitcoin is the ETFs. And there's no way in hell that anyone can compete with the amount of money that's actually flowing into ETFs. Now, these ETF investors and these Michael Saylor investors, they ain't investing in altcoins. They're investing in Bitcoins. And remember that what we're looking for is we're looking for relatively more money flowing into altcoins than into Bitcoin. But we've never had a market where the institutions were so hungry and invested so quickly in Bitcoin. And so we could get a cycle in this market where Bitcoin goes up to $150 and maybe $200,000 and altcoins don't move. And the reason why that may happen is because the truth is alt season only happens when more money flows into Bitcoins than into altcoins. And the amount of money flowing from into Bitcoin right now is never ever going to be matched, not even on a relative basis, by any kind of retail investor or any kind of altcoin investor. And so there is a big thesis to actually land up holding a lot of Bitcoin in your portfolio this cycle. And the reason is because the alts cannot outperform Bitcoin until relatively more money flows into altcoins than into Bitcoin. And remember, it's all relative to the market valuation. And so there is a thesis in this cycle to say that you should be in a lot of Bitcoin. That's why I've been in quite a lot of Bitcoin this cycle. I've traded out of my ETH, but mainly I've been actually in Bitcoin. And I have no plans to sell the Bitcoin because of this thesis. Because I don't see a world where any kind of investor brings more money on a relative basis into altcoins than Michael Saylor and the ETFs are bringing into Bitcoin. You may say, well, look, there's also an ETH ETF. Problem is that this ETH ETF just ain't getting lift off yet. It's just not flying yet. And that's one of the big problems that we're actually having. And if they do, what we're looking for is we got to look for flows into the ETH ETF that are over 1/6 of Bitcoin flows every single day. So we need to, from now on, I think what we need to do is look at the flows and divide by the market cap and see relative to the market cap how much is actually flowing in daily or weekly or monthly into Bitcoin and ETH, and that will give us a sign of whether it's actually happening. So the first reason why I think that we may get a very different kind of alt season, and maybe in this alt season we won't get dominance dropping as fast as we actually think, is because dominance will only drop when relatively more money flows into altcoins and into Bitcoin. And that ain't going to happen for a while in this market structure. Even if we all sold our Bitcoin and went into altcoins, relative to the amount of money that's coming in, we're small fish. And that ain't going to change the ratio between Bitcoin and altcoins. Next thing that we need to talk about in this cycle. In previous cycles, to launch a token was quite difficult. Like you needed to understand coding, you needed to understand smart contracts, you needed to have a dev, you needed to know how to make tokens. And launching a token was a lot of work and a lot of regulatory risk. In this cycle, the regulatory risk has started to come down, and the technical risk of actually launching a token is pretty much gone to zero. In fact, if you go to Pump Fun, anyone can launch a token, and they have 6.2 million different tokens have launched just on one platform called Pump Fun. And that number is by far higher than the total number of tokens in circulation in the 2021 bull run, which was maybe 20,000. This is 7,500, but I don't believe it. There were definitely a lot more cryptocurrencies than that. So what you can see is that if you take Pump Fun plus all these virtual agents plus, the number of tokens that is actually being launched in the market, we don't know the exact number that's being launched. Here there's an estimate that 15 million new tokens have listed on EVM, that 2.8 million new tokens have been listed. And remember that in the last bull market, I think there were 20 or 30,000 tokens in total that were actually listed. And so you've got all these tokens, and every single one of these tokens sucks liquidity out of the market. Now, if you have all these tokens sucking liquidity out of the market, it's not bad if you're getting a whole lot of new users. But there's no way in hell that we are bringing in 15 million new users into the market. No chance. We looked at the number of addresses that were launched just in this year. The problem is we don't know how many addresses per person. If you make an assumption, there's no way that there's 200 million people have come into blockchain. Depends on the number of people, but let's say that each person has 7 wallets. I don't know what the number is. What you're starting to realize is that the inflow of people into this market versus and let's say that people come in with money. The number of people times the amount of money they come into the market divided by the total number of tokens in the market just doesn't add up. tokens are launching way, 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 way too quickly. There are too many investment options. There's AI agents, there's meme coins, there's legit projects, blah, 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 blah. And unfortunately, there is no way in hell that we're going to get these the number of the new users are going to match the number of tokens that launch into the market. So what actually happens? If there are many, many, many tokens launching into the market, and the amount of users times the amount of money that they're bringing in is not big enough, ultimately none of those users actually end up getting rich, because the amount of money that they're bringing in just doesn't raise the level of the water. I'll show you a brilliant example of that, right? When Trump launched and moved and destroyed the liquidity in the entire market cap, even though we got 187,000 new retail users that were onboarded via one app called Moonshot, that entire event never moved the altcoin market at all. Which basically means that no matter how many users we bring in, because we are launching so many tokens, they're simply spreading the tokens, the money, across more and more and more and more tokens. And so that brings the number of, someone says, Ryan, are you live? Of course it's live, guys. We always do live. We always do live. The number of tokens is going up and up and up and up and up. And the number of people coming in just can't beat the number of tokens that's actually going up. And therefore no one or very few people actually end up making money. And in a world where very few people actually end up making money, then you've got a big problem because they're not bringing in many, many people. Now you want to make this even worse? We also have this thing called token emissions. What are token emissions? Well, there's two types of token emissions. There's token emissions like Bitcoin, and the Bitcoin token emissions are now at $300 million a week, which means that just to stay where we are, we have to bring in $300 million a week just to stay where we are, let alone to actually push the price up. But the Bitcoin token emissions are not the only token emissions that actually matter here, right? The token emissions also come out of the actual tokens. Like you can see this week, there's an extra 1.39 billion of tokens that are unlocked on the market, right? So you've got Bitcoin token emissions at $300 million. And this week, there's $1.39 billion of token emissions in the market. Who's buying this? Because if no one's buying it, then you're just going to push the price of the market down and down and down and down and down and down and down. And so I think the number of tokens and the ease at which tokens are being launched versus the number of people that are actually around to buy tokens is a big reason why this altcoin cycle won't be the same as all the other altcoin cycles. There's just no way that the entire altcoin market can go up if it's so easy to just launch more tokens in. And even if each token launch steals just a little bit of liquidity, the problem is when Pump.Fund's launching 6 million new different types of token projects, you're going to get into a point where there's just no way that this market can actually go up. And so what I believe is that it's going to be very, very, very difficult to get an alt season like the alt seasons that we're used to, where the market actually outperforms Bitcoin by a whole lot. I'm not saying the altcoins can't go up. I'm just saying I'm not sure that as an entire asset class, the altcoins can outperform Bitcoin like they have in all the previous cycles for the reasons that I've told you. And certainly not on the background of no Fed liquidity. So you can see that every time in 2017 when we had an alt season, we started very low. So it was very easy to push the number up because there was a very small number of tokens. In the next altcoin season, we had the biggest stimulus event and the biggest Fed printing event of our lifetimes. But in the absence of those, what is going to bring so much liquidity into the market that altcoins are going to be able to attract more capital on a relative basis than Bitcoin? And the answer is, short of a catastrophe, I don't see that actually happening. So I think, to be honest, we ain't getting an altcoin season like the altcoin seasons that we're used to. I'm not saying altcoins ain't going to perform. I'm just saying as an asset class, I don't see a world where all the altcoins outperform Bitcoin like they have in previous cycles. So now with that in mind, the question is, what are you supposed to do and how are you supposed to make money in this market? Well, number one, the easiest way to make money in this market is to invest in Bitcoin, because there is a lot of money that's going to come into Bitcoin and Bitcoin will start going up. Problem is, that ain't going to make you rich, right? You and I know that investing in Bitcoin ain't going to make you rich. The other thing that you can do, and this I got from Jordy, he says, I went for a long walk today and listened to Felix Zaloff's on Grant Williams' podcast. Highly recommended. He said, need a sub to listen, but the TLDR, the anthem of this year is 2025 will be a trader's paradise and an investor's hell. And I think he's specifically talking about a altcoin investor's hell. There's a lot of volatility in this market, but there's not enough money to push all the altcoins basically going back up, right? And so what I recommend here is that you actually learn how to trade. If you want to make money, one of the ways that you can actually make money is actually by learning how to trade. Now, I like this tweet from Dan Crypto. He says, something I always recommend to new traders is set aside a small part of your overall long-term portfolio for trading. It makes so much sense. You're less likely to risk too much of your overall portfolio. It makes you likely to start using your main portfolio as collateral, etc., etc. Generally, I think that you should take a small part of your portfolio and you should learn how to trade. I think the important thing about learning how to trade is to understand that you're never, ever, ever naturally going to be a good trader unless you're an absolute natural pessimist, right? So I think Josh is a good trader, but that's because he's an absolute natural cynic and pessimist. He questions everything. He's always the contrarian. That is why he's probably a good trader. I have met 1 million people in my life that have told me they're going to be good traders, and they're amazing traders as the market goes up, and they're all left holding their underpants at the end of the cycle. If you want to be a good trader, you need to learn how to trade. You need to learn how to trade, and you need to use data points, and you need to use charts, and you need to use indicators, and all those things that completely remove you from emotion. Now, look, I don't want to punt our school, but I can tell you that we have a school. We have 4 schools in our school. Dylan has a charting school with an accelerator school, which teaches you how to use indicators and to automate your trading. Sheldon has a simple way to trade. Kyle is the deep dive master, and Eric Crown is building a bulletproof trading school. If you want to join those schools, they're free. A lot of them start like in the next week or so. You can absolutely get in for free. Just go to here. So go here. And you can see it over here. There are links. So literally, you do nothing. You just have to click on these links, sign up with these links, and you're going to get in for free. There are links. There we go. So here we go. There's all the courses that you need all over here. You can sign up using these links, and you can actually get in for free. Don't think that you're just going to jump into the market and all of a sudden you're going to be a good trader, because you're not. I've seen it. Not even I can't trade, or I couldn't trade. I've done these courses. Now I'm a slightly better trader, but I'm still not a trader. Lastly, you need to learn to play narratives. And when I say need to learn how to play narratives, you need to understand that in this market, you're going to get winners for a short period of time and losers for a short period of time. Right now, it's all about AI agents. But the AI agents is coming at the cost of meme coins. Look at the drop in the charts of meme coins versus look at the increase in the charts of AI agents. That's what the cycle is going to be about. It's going to be about the same pool of capital moving from one narrative to another. You need to be close to the fire. You need to be able to spot those narratives, and you need to be able to move your money from one narrative to another. And that is how you're going to end up making money in the cycle. And so to summarize, I don't think that we're going to get, I do think that all altcoins are going to, or that altcoins are going to go up. I don't think all altcoins are going to go up, and I certainly don't believe that all altcoins are going to outperform Bitcoin. If you want to beat that, you've got to be very, very, very close to the fire. And probably whilst this volatility is going on, you need to learn to trade. That is what I think you need to do. I've given you guys trading. I don't recommend, for anyone, by the way, I don't recommend that you use anything more than a very small part of your portfolio to trade. I think the majority of your portfolio should be in large multi-cycle bets. Sui, Solana, multi-cycle bets, protocols that are going to be around for multi-cycle that you don't really care about. You don't watch them from day to day. But I think a small part of your portfolio you can have fun with and you can trade. You'll get a new skill and you may actually land up making money in this volatility. Let me know what you think. By the way, people are telling me the market's pumping. 105,703. Do we know why the market's pumping? So we got, let's see, what is actually going on here? Show group.
Is something that
okay, so Cynthia, okay, what is Cynthia Loomis? She's heading up the strategic reserve. She says 10 a.m. It's now. Okay, so where is it? Let's stay. Let's stay. It's 10 a.m. Let's stay 10 a.m. She said.
Yes.
Okay, we may as well just sit here then and see what the hell's going on. Researchers, if you do see anything, let's have a look here. Let's see what's going on here. Is there anything going on? Researchers, if there is, just drop it in the show group. I'd hate to drop the show and then like the biggest news of the year comes out.
The reserve.
Oh, someone says it could be Wyoming time. She 7. It's now 7 a.m. She's in Wyoming. I can't sit here for 3 hours.
Yeah, it's either Wyoming or DC time.
And what is the time in DC now?
It's now.
Now it's 10 a.m.
Now it's 10 a.m.
Wyoming's in 7 p.m.
Okay, so
She has to mention the time zone.
which time zone, clown? Hold on, let's actually tweet it and say. I mean, you can't say 7. We think everyone lives on the same time. You think, oh, someone says it's in 1 hour. It's in Wyoming, and it's in 1 hour and 55 minutes. Could be big.
Yeah.
Could be big. Could be big. But which time zone? Which
Wyoming.
10 a.m. I mean, that's quite irresponsible. She knew I was live. She didn't even say what time zone.
Yeah, I think it's Wyoming. So like in.
This guy's the winner. He says, Cynthia, just drop the contract already. Okay, so are we waiting? I mean, I'll wait. You know me. I'm crazy. I'm crazy like that.
2 hours.
Okay. Let's see. Okay, so I don't think it's coming out, eh? Is it coming out?
No.
Big things are coming up. I'm very much staying tuned. But which 10 a.m.? Okay, so this is why everything's happening here.
Yeah, this is why the price is
You see, but this is going to move Bitcoin and the altcoins are just not going to keep up because, you know why? You need relatively more money to flow into altcoins and into Bitcoin.
A strong rejection on Bitcoin now.
Yeah.
Someone says a strong rejection on Bitcoin. You see strong rejection on Bitcoin. It's because she said the wrong 10. She said it's the wrong 10 a.m. That's what happened. I mean, we can wait here and see. I don't think anything's going to happen though. Let's see. She meant Wyoming time. That's the thing. Something big is cooking. Well, I know what he's talking about, Justin's son. I think he's Peking duck. Let's see. Let's see. Something's been. I mean, the whole market moved on the senator saying big things are coming. Stay tuned for 10 a.m.
Senate to vote at 10. Let me send this to you.
Wait, something's happening. Senate to vote at 10 a.m.
Yeah.
Can you send it to me, sir?
Yes.
Things are happening. Things are happening. Everybody, this is a very unprompted, as you can see. If you sent it to us today, that would be really nice. Senate to vote at 10 a.m. on Senator Loomis becoming chair of Digital Asset Committee. Ah, what a letdown. I mean, what a letdown. We're thinking strategic reserve and she's thinking big... Senate to vote at 10 a.m. on Loomis becoming chair of Digital Asset Committee. I mean... no, come on. Seriously?
It's a big moment
For her, it's big, but it's not for us. Seriously?
Oh,
Big things are coming. You play with us like that. So they're voting on Senator Loomis becoming the chair of the Digital Asset Committee.
Next time was.
send it to 0.
What a letdown. No wonder it was a big rejection like that. You see, that's the problem. It plays with your emotion. 105, 103.
Yeah, I was leveraged to my kids.
Were you leveraged?
I was.
And then, oh, you're out now. You closed or you got closed? Be honest.
I know I closed.
You closed.
Small loss.
Oh, marginal.
Oh, what a joke. Anyway, see you guys again tomorrow. Hopefully after 10 a.m. Until then, trade well, my friends.